One of the really fun parts of GMing is creating lore for your campaign. But how do you get that info to your players without boring them with a 30-minute lore dump? That's what we're going to discuss in today's video. Most of us have been at a table where the GM, or maybe even a player, is more interested in the lore than everybody else. And it can feel like listening to a 10-year-old tell you about their favorite dinosaur or Pokemon. You can find yourself nodding along and feel like you just listened to a whole bunch of gibberish because nothing really stuck. And maybe there was important info in there that you missed. So how do you avoid this happening when you're a GM? Before I answer that question, if you're new here, hi, I'm Dawn. This is Roll for Initiative. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our weekly videos all about tabletop RPGs and our other geeky interests. Okay, so first of all, I think it's important to be aware of whether the lore is relevant to an adventure or it's just world lore. It is good to have both. You can get a lot of info that can be helpful to your party for adventures with lore. A legend that hints at the dragon's weakness, history of an important artifact or location can tell the party a lot about what they should plan for. And understanding the culture and religious practices can ease social interactions with key NPCs. At the same time, dropping bits of general world lore is going to make the world of the game feel more expansive and real. Plus, it's just fun. And if you have a good mix of world and adventure-focused lore, players won't always know what info is really a clue for their adventure, so they'll probably listen a bit more closely. And it's so much fun as a player when I put the pieces of the puzzle together and figure something out. Plus, often world lore can morph into adventure lore if the party shows interest. Okay, so with this in mind, how do you get this info to your players? First, have this info come from an NPC. It may be that the party overhears something, or they've actively sought out an expert on the subject. Whatever the approach, by having an NPC deliver this info, you're naturally going to have the players more engaged as they can have a conversation with the NPC about it. Now, there are times where an NPC can't give the info, like when the party decides we're going to the library, or a player is asking about something that would be character knowledge. For these moments, I think it's great to be specific, but not long. You can be brief. You don't need to recite an entire 200-page book to them. Give them the gist. Now, this isn't to say don't give any details. In fact, I often sprinkle in details either because those details are important or because it adds flavor. I may be very specific with the description of the amulet that belonged to the champion of a god because I know that the party is going to stumble across this amulet later on in the campaign. Or I may mention that in reading about the history of the city, the author keeps going off on tangents about events or people that led to the poor quality of coffee available to the author during his life. That's not important, it's just fun. And makes it feel like, that author was a real person and the things going on in the city are happening to a real city instead of just a fictitious one. I want to take a quick moment to thank all of our patrons, especially Tucker. Becoming a patron is the best way to support what we do, plus you get some awesome perks. So head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative today. Okay, so know your table. Pay attention to what they enjoy. If they love hearing the legends and history of the world, but don't really care for religion, focus your energy on sharing legends and history. Probably not everyone is going to be into the same stuff, so it is a balancing act. If there's one player who is into the lore, you may do a little bit more of like a one-on-one with them or share it outside of game time. As a game master, I'm always pumped when somebody wants to hear about my world, so I will happily share even if it's just over drinks after game or through text. Mainly, I try to pay attention if there's anything that the entire table has little interest in. That stuff I will try and shy away from, and when I do need to give that info to the table, I do so as directly as possible so we can get to more of what everyone enjoys. One of the best ways I've found of sharing lore with your table without boring players is let your players do it. I'm going to talk through two different ways. First, let your players create the lore. This is great to do in a homebrew as part of character creation. If you want a bit more structure on how to do this, you can check out our video on Session 0 games. But give your players a bit of guidance and then hand them the reins to fill in details about the culture or regions they are from, perhaps a legend they heard growing up, details about their religion's practices. Then you can provide the impetus for that lore to come up and the player character can share with the group. You can also do this after character creation by having players fill in details of lore or providing opportunities for them to make things up, like telling them, hey, there's going to be a fireside session for the party to share stories, or having the bard describe the gist of the song they are performing to get a free meal at the tavern. The other way you can let your players share world lore is by just giving it to them. Again, this is great to do during character creation, providing the player with the knowledge their character would have about the world, history, legends, etc. I've also blue booked info to players between sessions, sending them a message with details of lore they wanted to look into. Great if somebody is wanting to do a library session and they aren't going to need that information until the next session or later on. And if you know the party is going to stumble across information, or at least highly suspect it, you can write it out on a note card and give it to the player who uncovers the secret diary, history book, or religious text, whatever it is, and then they can read it and share it with the group. All this to say, if you really love world building and creating lore, you should share it. Game masters should enjoy the game as well as the players. So if sprinkling in bits of lore that you find really cool into your game is enjoyable, even if it's not related to quests or your players aren't super into it, then go for it. You may just want to do so in moderation to balance what you enjoy with what the rest of the table enjoys. So what about you? Do you use any of these methods or have a different one to impart lore to your players? Let's chat about it more in the comments down below. And if you're looking for more GM advice, we've got a whole playlist of various topics for you to check out. I'll put a link to that up here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Okay, so with this in mind, I don't even know what I just said. Okay. Ugh. Sleep deprivation. Whee!